Good day, everyone. Welcome back to our new topic, research instrumentation. So for this topic, we're going to discuss the following. So the purpose or rationale of instrumentation, the validity, reliability, the characteristic of a good measuring instrument or research instrument for short, and adoption, adaptation, and or self-constructed instrument. So basically, you have three options. Either you adapt, and self-made or create your own, and the different parts of the instrument or survey or checklist. Okay, so rationale. So the main purpose why we have instrumentation goes back to the purpose of the instrument. So research instrument, again, in our case, it could be survey, checklist, or other tools that is used for collection, measurement, and analysis of data related to your research interest. In our case, that would be more of collection and measurement. Okay. And the data gathered will be used for analysis of our data. Okay. Next is the purpose of the instrumentation. Why we have instrumentation is to make sure that we're capable of measuring the research construct that we have created. Using such tool, we were able to use the measurement that gives us the user a numerical value that corresponds to the variable being measured or construct being measured. In our case, what we cannot measure, we cannot predict. What we cannot predict, we cannot comprehend. So basically, we need numbers for this one. So for example, if you're asking a research about effectiveness, how would you measure effectiveness? Would you use a categorical scale of measurement like effective and not effective? Or would you use a more expanded or more sensitive scale of measurement such as um, very effective, neither or neutral, or not effective, or very or slight effective, or not effective. So that creates some sort of a space or what we call a gap or interval in some cases. However, our measurement is not perfect, so we need to check whether our instruments are capable of measuring such phenomenon or research construct. So in this case, we're going to discuss research instrumentation. So the very concept of the heart of what we have is the concept of validity and reliability. We want our instrument to be both valid and reliable. What do you mean by that? For an instrument to be useful in measuring phenomenons or what we're trying to predict or what we're trying to measure and understand our research, it should be both reliable and valid. So what is reliability? Reliability is the ability of our predictions or our answers that yes, we have the expectancy that our answer will be the same. Example, if your answer for this particular period is yes, after 10 years, if the concept hold valid or the concept remains or the measurement is reliable, we could expect that the same concept could be measured after 10 years, both yes. For example, what is your gender? So for my gender, I'm not expecting anything that will happen to me. So I'm expecting 20 years from now that my gender will still male. Another thing is, what's your nationality? Again, after 5 years, I'm not expecting any changes to my nationality. I'm still Filipino. So now the concept could be measured, okay? And we're expecting that same result will occur for a certain period of time. Again, not all data is reliable for such long extent of time. There are some data that is only true for certain days. And that is understandable because, again, it depends on the quality and the nature of the data you're trying to measure. Next is validity. Validity remains to say that your measuring is correct or accurate. So accuracy, for example, we're expecting that most of our result will be correct, right? So there should be at the center of the bullseye. Validity means to say that your response is capable of hitting the target or capable of hitting the spot or being accurate in measuring the phenomenon. Now, in case that we don't, uh, in case that there are some cases that your measurement is valid because you have hit a certain spot. However, reliability issue also compromise the quality of your instrument because we're not expecting that some cases, or for example, some phenomenon that your instrument are not measuring well, and all the while you're measuring good. Example, just imagine your BP or thermometer to have this kind of phenomena. So this will be posing the researcher to a very compromising situation of accuracy. So, for short, we need both a reliable, meaning to say consistent, valid means to say accurate measurements coming from our instrument. Now, how can we have accurate measurement? So again, we go back to the concept of validity and reliability. Reliability is to the extent which the outcome are consistent when experiment is repeated more time, or in our case, when observation is repeated more than once. And definition for validity is the extent to which the instrument are used to the experiment or observation measure exactly what you want to measure. So basically, that validity refers to accuracy of your measurement. Reliability means to say your consistency of getting the same answer. Next. So since validity and reliability are important, they are somewhat affecting the errors of our responses. Particularly, there are two types of error in research, type 1 and type 2 error. So when say type 1 error occurs when there is a false positive. The probability is of alpha. So meaning to say, it's a false positive. You accept the alternative hypothesis while rejecting the null hypothesis. So meaning to say that you are reading or what we call false reading in instruments. Now, the same way for type 2 error is that it's basically a false negative. Okay, false negative. What you're trying to measure as not, or what you're trying to measure is, which are not included, but it should be included. I mean to say, your null hypothesis is accepted, okay, but it is should be rejected. Meaning to say, you're stating a null, meaning to say there's no relative or there's no relationship, uh, but it should be rejected because there is a relationship. So basically type 2 error. So what they call false negative. It happens, for example, during COVID, because COVID, some of the tests, like for example, the MRA test or the saliva test is only sensitive for a particular antigen that could be produced at the very high onset of the infection, assuming to say could be only produced after exposure to the virus after 5 days. However, you are already infectious 3 days prior to the to the to the manifestation or symptoms. So the instrument is incapable of detecting that you are already infected, while the truth is that you're infected. So that is what we call the the COVID test of the automatic COVID or the disposable COVID test. So that's the majority of the sources of type 2 error during the pandemic. While the golden standard for that is the what we call the nasal paranasal test, MRA test. So it prevents both type 1 and type 2. However, the problem is that in terms of economy, in terms of implementation, or the mechanics is quite complicated. So it's not really, and of course the scarcity of the test itself. So that's a problem. So during that time, we have a problem that we are seeing people that are negative, however, they're already infected. And then it causes the spread of the disease. Okay. So now how to avoid that? So of course, in our research, it's important to make sure that we don't have we're not committing for type 1 or type 2 error in our paper. So how to avoid that? So there are some tips to avoid that. So these are the common possible sources of errors. For type 1, basically, type 1 again is accepting positive result where in fact your non-hypothesis should be accepted. So basically, false reading to. So number one, there is a measurement of error. Perhaps the measurement of error. Let's say you are not sensitive enough to check or to to indicate that the hypothesis should be rejected or accepted. Lack of random sample. Okay, so that is the drawbacks of having non probabilistic sample technique, because your respondents or samples of your study is geared towards certain characteristics. So it is subject indeed for type 1 error. So that is the major drawback of non-probabilistic sampling technique. Number two, the p-value is too liberal. So our p-value is 0.5. So that is acceptable for social science. Okay. So, I mean, that's 10. So it means to say that for you're accepting 10% of margin of error, that is quite a big number. Making, again, that is causing our instrument to become insensitive. Another thing is the bias of the investigator and improper use of one-tailed tests. Okay, so that is possible causes for type 1 error. For type 2, again, measurement error. So basically, you will see measurement error. So what is the number one cause of measurement error? They, or, or simply to put it in context, that is the wrong or the misuse or inadequate construction of your instrument. So mean to say, whether you adapt or construct your instrument and you have committed some error along the way, it will manifest as type 1 or type 2. However, when you adapt, basically just copy it verbatim, and the instrument is well tested, there is a very minimal chances of committing type 1 or type 2 error. So that is why when we are doing research, it's advisable to just replicate a instrument that is already pre-tested by other researcher to minimize the chances of occurrence of type 1 and type 2 error. Because again, they have much more knowledge, competence, and time when they're doing the instrument or when they're doing the research. Okay. Now, next is, of course, the lack of sufficient number. Okay. So the population is too small. So the sample size also affect the type 2 error. So too small sample size leads to uh, problem, because if the sample size are too small, we cannot predict or we cannot represent the total population. So we cannot predict what is the general sentiment or response of the population, because you have gathered insufficient number of samples. Next, again, the power of samples or the ability to generalize conclusion for the greater population is directly related to the number of your sample, as dictated by the greater greater number rule, which states in statistics that the larger your sample size, it increases the power to predict or predict the general sentiment or behavior of the research population. So that is the reason why we need to identify the optimal number of the sample size of your research study, because that will enable us to avoid type 2 error. Next, your p-value is too conservative. Yung isa naman too liberal, this one is too conservative. If it's too conservative, the tendency is for you to reject or for you to accept null hypothesis where in fact the alternative hypothesis should be accepted. So kung masyado siyang conservative. So ideally, our p-value should be set at 0.05. So that's our ideal p-value. P-value should be set at 0.5. Why? It's social science, right? If it's 0.10, that's too liberal. Meaning to say, marami pwede mangyari dyan. So you are accepting all responses, 90% of confidence, and there are 10% of probability that you will have mistake. But if it's a social science, you want to have around 95% of confidence that you will observe the same phenomenon. Now, if your p-value is 0.01, it is more of natural science because or medicine that is very conservative to them because that is what is required to them. Okay, so our case, it's our p-value should be 0.05. Next, treatment not properly applied. So there is a bias towards your sampling technique or sample size. Okay. Next, let's go now. So what are the characteristics of a good measuring instrument? So there are, number one, again, the foundation would be reliability, validity, objectivity, discriminating power, adequacy, and usability. To name the few, let's go with reliability. Again, reliability is the ability to be consistent. Be consistent in a way that it cross time and cross location or local, and it crosses people. So the method to find out reliability, and the most common, is what we call the test and retest method. So how would you know if your response is consistent? Simple. So for the test and retest methods, or test and retest method, for example, I tested your competency in skills. For example, tour guiding. I tested you a quiz from, let's say, a actual demonstration performance from week 1, and then I compare it again after two months. Okay. So now, let's say, what's your score? If your score in the first week is 98%, and next month your score remains at 95%, I could say that there is a reliability of instrument because the response is the same. Now, it is more powerful if I compare it a week, month, after 3 months, after 6 months. And then I gather the data, then the scores are around 98, 95, 95, 98, and 99. So basically, it's consistent because it is a score within a certain range. However, if your scores are, let's say, first week, that is 98. Your next, after a month, let's say 1 month, that's 88. And after 2 months, that is 98. And then after 6 months, that's 87. So I think there is a problem of consistency because uh 98 and 87 are very in terms of significant difference, is very significant in that way. So you can also compute using the R coefficient for the reliability to measure whether the responses are reliable or correlated. So these are the standard coefficient, and the higher coefficient, the better. But of course, we don't expect perfect one. So 0.75 would be acceptable, or you have to set, let's say, 0.80, that would be acceptable. Now, another popular test is what they call the crunchback alpha, which is basically a way of assessing reliability by comparing the amount of shared variance or covariance among the item making the instrument to amount the overall variance. So basically, this is um, consult your the statistician because that is technical. Okay. So in crunchback alpha, we want to see 0.9, which means to say that the internal reliability is excellent, 0.8 is good, 0.7 is acceptable. And below to that, 0.6 is questionable, which we cannot include for research, and 0.5 that is poor. So any score below 0.7 is not accepted. Okay. Likewise, in the reliability uh, test and retest method, ganun din. You have to set your standard. Let's say the standard is 0.8. However, 0.7 something is still acceptable. So to simply put it, paano ba yung test and retest method? For example, di ba? For example, pinaghihinalaan kang kumopya ng teacher mo. So what is the most ideal way to determine whether you are indeed cheating or not? Simple lang. Let's say we compare the scores, what you have got in the first test, okay, that you are alleged being suspected as cheating during the exam, and then you have to retake it after a few days, let's say a matter of 3 days, and the difference of the score should not be far enough. I mean, it should not be around the grade of 80 versus 95. So that is significant different. Okay? So meaning to say the correlation is, there's no correlation, meaning to say the instrument is unreliable. Therefore, indeed, uh, your response from day one is different from the response on day three. Therefore, there is a chance, high chance that you have already committed cheating during the first day of the exam because of the difference. Because the premise here is that if you answer it, most of your answer will be retained in your head. And of course, there is a similar manner, behavior, or pattern they're going to answer the exam. And this is the way you have answered it before. And another way is that there is a tendency for you to have more increased scores during the retest. That is quite the natural flow of things because 3 days of time will give you ample amount of time to review your work or to review the exam because you have already an idea of the matter of questions that are going to be asked to you. Now, the tendency is your score should be increasing. Now, in this case, your score declines. So there is a high probability that indeed you have committed a cheating during the first day. Next. So there are different types of validity. We have content validity, criterion-related validity, concurrent validity, and construct validity. A separate video is being posted the same with this recording to discuss the different types of validity. But we are concerned about the content and the criterion validity in particular. Now, objectivity is basically the elements of science, no, or absence of bias or subjectivity. So objectivity means to say that you are objectively observing the phenomenon. The test is checked by two different supervisors and the coefficient of correlation is found. So meaning to say, in every research, we have the objectivity. That is why your grade during the research title defense as well as your research paper presentation or defense are being subject to a panel of three because this avoids subjectivity because if I'm the one going to evaluate all of your work, it might be higher or it means be highly appreciated or poorly appreciated. So therefore, that is because I myself is subject to my own bias. For example, I observe that I have a particular tendency to favor some topics that that are arousing my interest or have a similarity to my research interests. Now, of course, there is a proclivity for me to also favor topics that are easy to understand compared to a complex or highly uh, abstract concepts in your research. So to avoid that, there are particular research panel members that are selected from your faculty members to validate and corroborate our thoughts to give proper valuation or proper evaluation to your paper in that sense. So that is what called objectivity. In our research instrument as well, there should be an objectivity. The matter how how it is how the word were coined, how it should be more scientific, more neutral. We avoid the use of pronouns, personal or informal language. It should be stated in a simple, formal English language. Not too technical, not too highfalutin, not too archaic, not too complicated sentence structure. And of course, we want simple, neutral, and formal language. That is how we should create our instrument. Next, discriminatory power. So the test should measure the small difference in responsibility. So the formula is indicated as this. Okay. So discriminating power indicates that your instrument is capable of discriminating or mean to say capable of what we call having sections or having choices. Okay. So for example, we compare the number of students in upper group who answer correctly versus number of students in the lower group who answer correctly. So meaning to say, we will divide the number of respondents to, let's say, from respondents from A to M and respondents from N to Z. So we will compare the responses and basically we will get what we call the discriminating index. The higher the discriminating index indicates that your instrument is highly discriminatory, meaning to say it could measure uh, difference of scale or difference of responses. Okay, so meaning to say it's capable of discerning very satisfactory to satisfactory versus slightly satisfactory. So that is what we call discriminatory power or discriminating power. Next. Adequacy. So basically, is all your SOP being answered or being asked in your instrument? So that is meaning to say by adequacy. Is the instruction being given direct to the point without any areas for confusion? So that is adequacy. Last but not the least is the feasibility or usability. Are we capable of delivering the instrument? For example, are we using language friendly? Is our research sample population or our respondent will be number one is that has access to internet if you're going to have online survey, okay? Or is the survey instrument too small if we're going to print it out? Or is the survey instrument should be written in English and Tagalog and those things. So these are basically about the usability or the practical application of your conduct of your survey. Okay, next. So though we didn't discuss about the checklist, but for the checklist, it should have both the elements of what we have discussed a while ago. But for checklist, since checklist could be answered by the respondents or by participant, there should be tailored fit according to their level of their comprehension. Okay? So you may use the same element how we crafted survey for checklists. Now, next is we have the question whether how we're going to do with our instrumentation. Are we going to just leave it out to our related literature? Are we going to modify it, or are we going to construct our own? So we have the choice between adoption, and self-constructed instrument. Okay, adoption or adoptment or adopt with the past. Okay. So the first one or the first option is basically we're going to copy the instrument as it is. It's a verbatim instrument. So basically, wala po tayong babaguhin dyan. If we need to translate, we need to verify it with experts. So naging adapting na siya. Okay? So that's our first one. It's the easiest because there's already a established notion for that. Okay, so that is adopting. Second is we adopt, but we alter some parts of the instrument. That is called adapting. And the last but and the most difficult is you have to create your own instrument. Now, if I were you, I'm just going to select number one, which is the easiest. Number two, it's neither easy but neither difficult. So number two would be a much more preferred option for me rather than to go create my own. Okay, that would be I will explain to you the problem later on, or the challenges that you will encounter. Okay, why adoption? So adoption is basically if we have the same concept that you can find with your review of literature, the same idea, the same research framework, and of course the same variables, and there is an instrument for that. For example, what is the different personality of what is the personality different, or what is the different personality, or what is the research profile, or what is the personality profile of tourism student for batch, ganun-ganon. Okay. So you can have the instrument of personality test to determine the personality type. So you don't need to create your own instrument for this one because there is an already existing personality test for us to deploy. So adapt lang, di ba? Next, there are some instruments that are already being used such as Doxy Irritation Index, which are highly suggested if you're measuring the irritation of the tourist or visitor to a certain locale, which is brought to you by tourism. Or for hospitality, we have the ServQual or Service Quality Measurement proposed by Parasuman and Company. So that is a tool that you can use to measure service quality if you're conducting research about service quality. Now, the advantage is that it lessens the burden for both the researcher and the cost because you don't need to validate this instrument already because these are already well-established instruments in the industry. And another thing is that, of course, the panel will no longer question this because these are well-established. Again, this is standardized and globally recognized by people or expert in the particular discipline. Okay? Next, why adapt? Okay. So a while ago, we are discussing adapt with the Oscar. This one is with alpha. Okay. So however, there are some cases that we find the existing literature, particularly the instruments that are available for us, quite unsatisfactory because number one, our research local might be offering us a new insight or different angle or different research variable that is unique to the research local. For example, I cannot apply, or I'm not so sure if I could apply Doxy Irritation Index for a cruise ship because cruise ship has their own dimension, which is different from a regular tourist destination or tourist attraction site because in cruise ships, the dynamics there is that the people there or the resident there or the guests there are temporarily or they are temporary. So of course, applying Doxy Irritation Index for long-term cruisers versus short-term cruisers might have or might could offer different dimension because of the degree of the affiliation or affinity of the long-term cruisers to the cruise ships or to their cabin versus short-term cruises or cruiser that coming in and after 7 days they're gone. So basically, we cannot just apply the doxy irritation model as directly. We need to modify it because it has a different variable and different perception that is unique to the research local. And of course, there are some cases that the instrument that are developed, for example, then is for university student, we might want to downgrade the language that we have used and also apply a particular aspect of that particular instrument to the real life scenario of the high school student because the subject might not be the same. For example, there are different subjects in high school versus elementary and college. So though you're talking here, we're talking here general education, but how general is the general education or what is the prescribed courses might be different from different levels of education. So in high school, you might be talking about basic or your economic or economy. But in college, you're talking here more, let's say, more macro economy rather than the basic economy, which is basically different. So we have to tone or we have to adapt our instrument to a particular research respondent samples. Okay, next. So why adoption? So adapting an instrument requires more substantial changes. So substantial changes because you are basically following the same pattern or the line of thought is intact. However, you are adding some items, removing items, or altering some changes in the content that you found should be adapting to your research local or research respondents. No? So that is, but in principle, you still follow the general idea of the instrument. So it could be around 80% is intact, 20% is altered, or 70% is intact, 30% is altered, or 60% intact, 40% altered. But not totally different because if it's different, that is now your self-constructed instrument. So it should retain a semblance of the original instrument in question. Okay? So it should return a semblance of the original instrument in question. So the maximum that you can do is 60% you have retained and 40% you have altered. So that is how we do adaptation. Okay? So adaptation has a purpose. Okay? Next. Why self-constructed? So I think this is basically the hardest part when you're doing the self-constructed. Number one, you find that there's no suitable instrument in your RRL or in your literature that could measure your research variable or construct. For example, happiness. Wala kang makitang measurement for happiness. Pero imposible yan kasi ang daming mga measurement for happiness. So hindi mo kailangan gumawa ng measurement pa for happiness. You don't need to reinvent the wheel. You just have to use whatever technology is available and improve upon it. So that is how science and research work. Okay, next. We have to test the reliability and validity of the theories incorporated in the study. So basically, duda ka rin. So example, you are doubting whether the theory would be applicable to that particular local. So you have two options. Number one, you can adapt or you can self-construct. So for self-constructed, you're also validating a new theory or relative young theory that you should test its validity using your self-constructed instrument. And last but not the least, is you're aiming to contribute to the body of knowledge. However, let's be realistic. In our current level of bachelor research, we're not contributing we're not yet in the level of contributing to the body of knowledge, particularly into the instrumentation because our knowledge about research that is not that full grown yet, or hindi pa tayo nagbo-blossom to a full researcher. Okay? So we will have some problems along the way. So that's why when you are crafting your own instrument, okay, here's the guide. So here's the requirement for you. So the easiest is of course just adopt. So how would you know if you're for adoption or the O? If you're using theoretical framework, most likely you're going to use the instrument used in that particular study because that is theoretical. Your main purpose is to validate the theory whether it applies to your local. So you need to do what is required for you to do is just for your advisor's approval, and then after your advisor's approval of the instrument, you submit it to me and I will verify it if it's indeed for adoption or adopt or self-constructed ka. Now, if I find it for adopt, so wala na tayong problema. So there's no need for you to validate it to three experts validator. Next, if adopted, okay. So again, same flow. So advisor approval, course instructor approval, and then expert validators. Okay. So your expert validators with esto ha, sorry, should be composed of 3 members. Okay. Three experts. Bakit three? Hindi pwedeng isa. Hindi po pwedeng isa basically kasi nga magiging subjective siya. Kailangan tatlo para ma-break yung let's say yung dalawa hindi nagkasundo. So ano susundin natin? So you need another expert so to validate it. Okay? So we have to have 3 experts. So these experts are non-member of the panel. Also, syempre, bakit? Bakit hindi na lang panel, sir? Kasi nga, to avoid bias and objectivity, gusto rin namin makakuha ng ibang idea or ma-check din ng ibang tao yung ginawa ninyo because we might be biased towards our idea. Next. And nandoon naman ako. Next, the panel or the validator should be a TM faculty member from other college or schools with graduate degree in MS Tourism or Masters or MBA or any master's degree, if not HM Business, Psychology or related discipline concerning the research topics such as architect, if you're concerning urban development, landscape, etc., preservation, architect will be the best one, or education if you're developing curriculum, or let's say HR practitioner if you're developing HR training program, etc. So it also must include industry practitioner. Example, if you're talking about travel agency, so a bit, mas maganda siguro we have to verify or validate the instrument with them and also with your research beneficiaries or stakeholder. For example, you're going to have a survey in Luneta Park or let's say in Manila Zoo. I think your research beneficiary should also see your instrument, whether they could add more about what to ask in your research instrumentation and what things should be included in the research. So that is for the betterment of your instrumentation. Okay, so that is for adaptation. Okay, the A. Now about for self-develop. So you need to advisor approval, course instructor approval, and then you have to verify it with 3 experts. And then you have to pilot test it with at least 20 or 30 people. Okay. So pilot testing involves sampling or test sampling with your research target research population. Meaning to say, if you're going to visit, let's say, yung Hermosa Street, so doon ka magpa-pilot test. You need to gather 20 or 30 respondents from this site. And then you have to compute for the reliability test, either Crunchback Alpha or what we call the test and retest test. Okay, parang dami. Test and retest reliability. Pero mas mahirap yung rate test reliability kasi babalik ka ulit. Okay? Kasi nga may test tapos may retest ka. So in that case, hindi mo na mapapasagutan siya the same person. Okay? Hindi mo mapapasagutan siya sa same person. Okay. So at least dapat meron kayong uh, 20 or 30. Depende po sa sample size nyo. Okay? Now, if your sample size is 100, okay, 100 pala. 100 lang. Let's say, shitty HTM graduates lang. You might as well try to, kasi pag pinasagutan niyo na siya, i-disregard niyo siya or hindi niyo na siya sama doon sa findings sa research sa database natin sa mga actual respondents. So you might as well try to use other school or let's say try to prototype it. Let's say instead ng tourism program, what about HM program? Ganun, no? Para hindi nyo kasi 100 tapos kukuha ka ng 20 respondents. O so syempre paano pag wala nang sasagot, diba? So, try nyo kumuha sa ibang HM and then you just alter the research variable. Instead na pang TM siya, HM, gawin nyo pang HM. And then, palitan nyo lang naman yung questions, no? Instead na pang TM siya, pang HM. Or another suggestion is, i-try it with other school, di ba? So, let's say curriculum siya. But the problem is yung uniqueness kasi ng variable natin. Baka mamaya they are having different curriculum. You have to check as well, di ba? So, tignan nyo na lang. So, if worst comes to worst, if your sample or let's say your research population is just 100 or 130, you can get 10 as your pilot testing and then the computer reliability test. Kasi maliit lang sample size nyo or yung research population nyo. But if your research population is matter of hundreds, 800 or 1,000, for 1,000 it's 30. For hundreds, that's 20. Okay, that's our general rule. But for short, kung ayaw yung gumawa ng ganyan, stick with the first two. Adapt or adapt. Okay? So, yun na lang para mas mabilis tayo. Kasi tignan mo, pag self-constructed ka, ang dami mong gagawin. Sir, bakit ang dami namang ginagawa pag self-constructed? Kasi nga, hindi namin alam kung ano siya, valid siya o hindi. We need to see. Kasi nga, pag ginaw nyo siya at pinasagutan nyo siya ng basta-basta at mali ang lumabas na sagot dyan, hindi nyo na may babalik yan. Kasi malakas ang chances yung mag-refloat. Diba? Ulitin nyo ulit. So, sayang naman effort nyo. Para hindi tayo paulit-ulit, siguraduhin natin tama. Kaya ayusin nyo maigi yung SOP nyo. Kasi sa SOP, manggagaling din yung survey ninyo. Kung mali po yung SOP nyo, uulit at uulit kayo. Okay? You have to make sure that your SOP is correct. Okay? Pa-approve nyo muna sa advisor nyo and then approve to me. Anyway, makikita ko naman siya sa instrumentation. Kung okay na yung instruments or yung SOP nyo. Kasi naka-attach siya. Okay? Next. So again, as we're discussing it, parts of the instrumentation. So lipat lang ako. So I'm going to discuss to you the parts of the instrument. So what we need to present to your panel experts. Okay. Ito ang kailangan nyo i-present sa panel experts nyo. Number 1, malinaw na SOP. Lipat muna ako. So, pag magpapacheck po tayo sa panel of expert, kailangan po may kasamang SOP, research framework, saka research paradigm para malinaw. Or at least dapat may SOP ka para makita namin. Okay? So, the requirement would be, okay, ito, tingnan natin. So, restatement of the problem. This study aims to determine the influence of multi-sensory experience on tourist destination imagery as an input to enhancement of destination branding strategy in Escolta, Manila. Specifically, they would want to gather the demographic profile. So, malamang titas to kasi may demographic profile. How the multi-sensory approaches influence the tourist destination image in Skolta, visual, auditory, olfactory, tactile, gustatory. Next, how does the Department of Tourism DTCAM brand Skolta as a tourist destination? Promotion strategies, brand identity. Dalawang variable lang. Maraming variable pero ito lang kinuha nila. How does the perceived tourist destination image of Escolta align or deviate from intended destination branding efforts? And how can multi-sensory approach be used strategically as a foundation to enhance destination branding ng Escolta, Manila? So, yun po, no? So, ito yung mga question niya. Tatandaan po natin, i-relate po natin mamaya yung questions dito sa SOP, doon sa ating instrument. Because yung instrument kasi extension siya ng SOP. Paano natin kukunin yung sagot? So now, balik na tayo sa SOP or sa instrument. So sa instrument po, the first part of the instrument is what we call the inform and consent. So inform and consent siya. Ini-inform natin yung respondents kung sino tayo, anong purpose natin, at ano yung gagawin natin sa data nila. Example, we are the fourth year blah 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 in study blah blah blah. Your answer to each of the following question will be highly appreciated and rest assured that all of the collected information, specifically personal data, will be treated with utmost confidentiality by Private Act or by Data Privacy Act. Mali pa, di ba? Data, type natin, data privacy. Data Privacy Act of 2012 or Privacy Act or Private Data Privacy Act of 2000 blah blah blah. Known for your identity will be kept anonymous and all of the collected data will be used for academic purposes only. Lalagyan niyo po ng only. So ano bang batas ng RA 10? Mamaya check nyo na lang ha, pero alam ko Data Privacy Act yan. So, qualifier question. So, the first part is the informing consent part. So, purpose, paano mo siya ginagawa, ano yung kailangan mo sabihin, disclosure, etc. Ito siya, first part. Okay, next. Second part ng instrument, kailangan may qualifying questions ka. This is very important if nagpapasurvey ka online kasi you don't want just anybody to answer your question. Okay? Particularly pag online survey kasi hindi mo siya, wala kang control, wala ka dun eh. So hindi mo masasabi, ay hindi po kayo pwede or pwede po kayo sumagot. Ay, wag na po kayo sumagot kasi nga wala ka dun. Okay? So here's the qualifiers questions niya. So first, have you been to Escolta? O nga naman, kung wala ka sa Escolta, wala tayong tinatanong. Okay? So yes or no lang yan. Pag no, wala na, tapos na. Next, for what purpose did you visit Escolta? Sightseeing, dining, shopping, arts. Bakit? Kasi nga, the respondents should be able to do all of this for them to appreciate the multisensual landscape of Escolta. Kasi pag hindi niya nagawa to, hindi siya able to or hindi siya capable or able to answer the question later on. Next, how did you know about Escolta? Basically, this question is wala naman siyang enta, okay? So ako, eto, hindi ko alam bakit sinama nila, pero dahil sinama na nila, okay na. Sige, pero ako, pwede na tanggalin to. It's not important to qualify your respondents. Okay? Number 4 ang pinaka-importante, tingin ko. Are you 18 years old and above and willing to take part of this study? Yes or no? That is what we call inform and consent. Kasi if it's 17 and below, you need the parental consent. Unethical po yan pag hindi kayo maghingi ng parental consent because that is minor. Pwede kayong kasuhan doon. Okay? Tapos, you have to indicate if your answer is yes to all the question in question number 1, 2, and 4. In this case, 4. Importante yung 4. This is a 3. You may proceed with the survey. And then, thank you. You just have to, Next part would be your demographics. Okay, so demographic part na siya. Now, demographic is important if you're going to have the t-test. Meaning to say you're going to compare the significant differences of different means or subgroup of your population. Okay? Example, you would want to distinguish the difference between the age group. Let's say, is the perspective or is the response from age group 18-25 is different from age group 55 and above? May mga ganon, di ba? So, gusto mo malaman yon. Anyway, for significant t-test, basically, we just have to compare it, no? For the statistics. Okay? But again, I will not be requiring you anymore to do the inferential statistics. Baka wala na tayong time. Anong petsa na? Baka hindi na tayo matapos. Just ano lang. Next direction. Basically, this part is a part 2 which affects the predictor or predictor variable niya. Multisensor experience. Okay. In this case kasi, yung main variable is often than not presented in part 2. So, yung scale na ginamit niya is categorical. So, you have scale of 4. You have 1, 2, 3, 4. Strongly agree, agree, disagree, strongly disagree. So, I favor in this type of scaling. Kasi, bakit? Kita mo agad kung disagree or agree. Ayoko yung dating format na may neutral because neutral is very confusing to your research. Ano neutral? Hindi mo alam kung ano yung i-recommend mo because it's neutral. So better avoid coining gray zones or gray area because later on you will find it very difficult when you're doing your recommendations and a conclusion. Wala kang marirecommend kasi neutral nga eh. It's neither agree or disagree. So you better trunk it with agree or disagree, or you can use the 5 scale na, for example, for 5 scales natin, we can start as strongly disagree, disagree, agree, or somewhat agree, agree, or strongly agree. But again, if you ask me personally, I prefer to use the 4 scale lang. Kasi nga, mas madali siyang sagutan. Now, it's up to you. It's up to your advisor. As long as there is no neutral or gray zone, that's okay for me. Okay? So sometimes we also include not applicable. But of course, why put it if it's not applicable, no? So, yun lang. And then what I like with the instrument is that it's visually appealing and they have included definition for visual, the sense of light, blah, blah, blah. So that's basically the definition. And they have operationalized how would you measure visual. So example, this is visual. So visual, according to the study of Lam et al. 2022, is a sense of sight involves the use of eyes, image, namely the perception of tourists about space of the tourist resort. So ito siya, no? So they have adapted the instrument from previous study, so hindi ko na kailangan pa siya pre-test or reliability test because it's already adopted. So the same variable was used. Example, the urban landscape, street art, the visual appeal, etc. Escolta architecture, Escolta street is well maintained. So lalagay lang nila. So this is how they measure or operationalize the construct of visual, urban landscape, street art, visual. So perhaps they have gathered or they have consulted the literature or the study of Lam et al. And then they have used the same questionnaires or same variable that is used in the study. So they have just adapted it and modified it. Whatever is applicable to Escolta, they have included. Whatever is not applicable to Escolta, they have disregarded. Diba? So, ganun na lang ginawa. So, they have also include some areas which are not covered in the instrument. For example, in architecture. So, maaari nilagay nila doon. So, ganun din. For this one, tactile. Medyo mahaba lang, but I think this one is the best thesis because it's really well organized, no? This one, wala naman silang ginamit na theory dito, pero they have consulted the Department of Tourism in promotion material, yan, promotion. So finally, for our last part, but of course this one is for the ano na, no? So basically your instrument is composed of these parts. Okay, this one is not included because this is for validation purposes only. Okay, validation lang siya. Okay, this part. Okay. For validation purposes, ito siya. So instrument construct for destination sensory experience. So they have cited the particular study sources, for example, urban landscape to measure visual, street landscape visual, okay, aside from the main theory kay Laam. So nakita mo 1, 2, 3 lang siya. So they have combined it with sino main theory nila? Si Lam. So 1, 2, 3, ito siya. Urban 1, 2, 3. Okay? So, yung iba, dinagdag na lang nila doon sa work ni Lam. Okay. Dinagdag nila to mga missing. So, these are also cited from the study of Busova and Baxi. So, uh, they gather this measurement since it's a multisensory. Then, they have combined it with the existing literature. Okay. So, for short, madaling i-check to kasi there are adapted siya with A. So, madali siyang i-check. Now, for this one, it's constructed and since it's constructed, it was validated by the DTCAM and sino ba naman ako para kontrahin to since they have consulted with the user or beneficiary sa DTCAM. So my tendency is to agree with them because they are the user, they are the DTCAM. Okay? So later, you're going to be shown what we call an instrument. So ito po yung bibigyan nyo po. Let's say ito, di ba? Nag-validate na. So medyo nagalaw lang, pero don't worry. Okay? So ito po siya. It's an instrument validation form. So your advisor should accomplish this. So if it's your advisor or consultant, check if they agree, check, 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 check. Or let's say disagree, may remark tayo. Bakit ka nag-disagree? No aspect. So normally for your advisor, dapat agree lahat para ma-forward sa akin. Kasi kung sa advisor nyo pa lang, hindi na siya nag-agree, what's the point of forwarding it to me? Hindi naman din pala agree advisor mo. So malamang hindi rin ako mag-agree, di ba? Ganun siya. Now, what you're going to do for expert validator is upon approval to your advisor, upon approval to me, you're going to validate it with your expert validators. Okay? Papavalidate niyo sa expert validators. And then, balik niyo po sa advisor niyo po ulit and then to finally, so again, advisor ako, expert validator, babalik sa advisor niyo to finalize your instrument. Now, all of this hassle will be reduced if you're going to adapt lang with O. Okay? Kasi basically, hindi natin siya itetest eh. Ang mag-check lang kami dalawa ng advisor sa ako. Kasi sabihin lang namin, pwede siya. You can use this instrument, go and proceed. Ganun lang. Kasi nga, possible. Okay? So, yun nga lang, kailangan, your study should be related to that. No? Ganun lang siya. Okay? Anyway, ganun ang gagawin natin dito. So, matrabaho if we're going to construct your own instrument. So, I tend to dissuade you from doing that because you need to have the pilot testing. Hindi natin alam kung maayos ang grammar niyo or what. Okay? Nakakatakot siya. Now, the best one that you can do is to replicate or what we call the adapt the A. Now, pinaka the best or is just to replicate, adapt O para wala tayong masyadong problema. Okay? So yun lang. Thank you very much and I'm waiting for your questions later during our scheduled consultation.